the
No,
fun
no
part.
retakes.
Yeah.
No retakes. That's the fun part.
That's right. So we are reading now. So when you're not reading, please make sure you mute
Okay.
and then remember to unmute before you start. Because if I don't hear anything, I'll say, we need the next reading, please. And then you'll know.
Okay.
And if your house catches on fire and you got to get up and run out, I'll read it for you.
Something to raise this
I'll
up.
call 911 and then I'll do the reading.
Good. I can put- Yeah, something like that. Hold on.
I'm gonna have to. I can't watch yours without being on.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Real good.
You can make it higher if you want. Try that, that might be too high. Decent higher roof. Here, 'cause I know.
Okay. Okay. Can you sit there? At a chair and sit.
I'm just gonna-
I want to welcome you, those who are on Zoom and those who are on Facebook Live. Occasionally, I'm going to have to go down and let people in to the Zoom room to be a part of the service, and I'll do that in a moment. Let me explain the service to you briefly. Those of you who received the mailing received this nail, and I'm just going to ask you if you would hang on to the nail during the service, if you would like to. Just a reminder of what this day is about. So the service will be very straightforward. We have 4 of our folks who will be doing readings. There'll be a short meditation, extinguishing of the light, and at the end, because of the situation we're in, I, and unfortunately not Harry, will be singing Were You There at the end of the service. We wish he were able, but it's difficult to do. I hope you can hear the music, and I hope you can hear my voice. And I'd ask you if you would please mute yourself if you are not speaking during this time, and if our readers would do the same until it's their turn to do their reading. So let's begin with our first reading.
After Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to a place where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, because Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas brought a detachment of soldiers together with police from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that was to happen to him, came forward and asked them, "Whom are you looking for?" They answered, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus replied, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they stepped back and fell to the ground. Again, he asked them, "Whom are you looking for?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you are looking for me, let these people go." This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken. "I did not lose a single one of those whom you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear. The slave's name was Malchus. Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword back into its sheath. I am not to drink the cup that the Father has given me." So the soldiers, their officer, and the police arrested Jesus and bound him. First, they took him to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Cephas, the high priest that year. Cephas was the one who had advised the Jews that it was better to have one person die for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. Since that disciple was known as to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter was standing outside at the gate. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the woman who guarded the gate and brought Peter in. The woman said to Peter, "You are not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not."
Now the slaves and the police had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing around it and warming themselves. Peter also was standing with them and warming himself. Then the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Jesus answered, I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in synagogues and in the temple, where we as Jewish people come together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who heard what I said to them. They know what I said. When he had said this, one of the police standing nearby struck Jesus on the face, saying, Is that how you answer the high priest? Jesus answered, If I have spoken wrongly, testify to the wrong. But if I have spoken rightly, why do you strike me? Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. They asked him, You are not also one of the disciples, are you? He denied it and said, I am not. One of the slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, Did I not see you in the garden with him? Again, Peter denied it. And at that moment, the cock crowed. Then they took Jesus from Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. It was early in the morning. They themselves did not enter the headquarters, so as to avoid ritual defilement and to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate went out to them and said, What accusation do you bring against this man? They answered, If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you. Pilate was to them, Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law. They replied, We are not permitted to put anyone to death. This was to fulfill what Jesus had said when he indicated the kind of death he was to die.
Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, Are you the King of Jews? Jesus answered, Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me? Pilate replied, I am not of your religion, am I? Some of your own leaders have handed you over to me. What have you done? Jesus answered, My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here. Pilate asked him, So you are a king? Jesus answered, You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice. Pilate asked him, What is truth? After he had said this, he went out to the Jews again and told them, I find no case against him. But you have a custom that I release someone for you at the Passover. Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews? They shouted in reply, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a bandit.
What did the phone ring?
John 14, then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged, and the soldiers wore a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they dressed him in a purple robe. They kept coming up to him saying, Hail, King of the Jews, and striking him on the face. Pilate went out again and said to them, Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no case against him. So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, Here is the man. When the chief priests and the police saw him, they shouted, Crucify him. Crucify him, Pilate said to them. Take him yourself and crucify him. I find no case against him. The Jews answered him, We have a law, and according to that law, he ought to die because he has claimed to be the Son of God. He entered his headquarters again and asked Jesus, Where are you from? But Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate therefore said to him, Do you refuse to speak to me? Do you not know that I have power to release you and power to crucify you? Jesus answered him, You would have no power over me unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin.
From then on, Pilate tried to release him, but some of the people cried out, If you release this man, you are no friend of the emperor. Everyone who claims to be a king sets himself against the emperor. When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus outside and sat on the judge's bench at a place called the Stone Pavement, or in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover. and it was about noon. He said to the Jews, "Here is your king." They cried out, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Pilate asked them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but the emperor." Then he handed him over to them to be crucified. So they took Jesus, and carrying the cross by himself, he went out to what is called the place of the skull, which in Hebrew is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on either side, with Jesus between them. Pilate also had an inscription written and put on the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the people read this inscription because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, in Latin, and in Greek. Then the chief priests of the Jews said to Pilate, "Do not write, 'The King of the Jews,' but this man said, 'I am King of the Jews.'" Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." Is this all?
When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his clothes and divided them into 4 parts, one for each soldier. They also took his tunic. Now the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from the top. So they said to one another, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see who will get it." This was to fulfill what the scripture says. "They divided my clothes among themselves, and for my clothing they cast lots." And that is what the soldiers did. Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. After this, when Jesus knew that all was now finished, he said, in order to fulfill the scripture, "I am thirsty." A jar full of sour wine was standing there. So they put a sponge full of the wine on the branch of the hyssop and held it to his mouth. When Jesus had received the wine, he said, "It is finished." Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Since it was the day of preparation, the Jews did not want the bodies left on the cross during the Sabbath, especially because that Sabbath was a day of great solemnity. So they asked Pilate to have the legs of the crucified men broken and the bodies removed.
Then the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first and of the other who had been crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and at once blood and water came out. He who saw this has testified, so that you also may believe. His testimony is true, and he knows that he tells the truth. These things occurred so that the scripture might be fulfilled. None of his bones shall be broken. Then again, another passage of scripture says, they will look on the one whom they have pierced. After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, though a secret one because of his fear of some of the leaders, asked Pilate to let him take away the body of Jesus. Pilate gave him permission. And so he came and removed his body. Nicodemus, who had at first come to Jesus by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, weighing about 100 pounds. They took the body of Jesus and wrapped it with the spices in linen cloth, according to the burial custom of his people. Now there was a garden in the place where he was crucified, and in the garden there was a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid. And so, because it was the Jewish day of preparation and the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there.
So we
Sending
are-
after the lightning.
We are in Act 2 of the three-part story. And the central point, I guess, I make every Good Friday is that we really can't understand the resurrection unless we've sat at the table and then witnessed today. Unless we've struggled with the death of Jesus. And the best way to do that is to hear the story. Which means that, sadly, most Protestants don't really get the whole story. It's one of the reasons why a lot of churches read the Passion story on Palm Sunday, because they figure people aren't going to show up on Thursday and Friday, and they want them to hear it. But Palm Sunday has its place too. That's an important part of the story as well. The tragic nature of Good Friday is it's really hard to take, especially if, like me, you're holding a nail. It just brings it home, you know, to think about that. And these are little nails, not big ones. We're often in denial about death. And, you know, we have to walk that lonesome valley, as the song says, because Jesus walked it too. Good Friday is the low point of our understanding of who God is and what the story of Jesus is. And I think the failure that the church has made over the years is that we talk about this as part of the plan, you know, that it had to happen. And you all know, if you've heard me enough times, that I disagree. I don't think it was part of God's plan. I think it was human sin, humanity's flawed nature and fear. The mission of Jesus was to bring the kingdom, and we got in the way. mean, if you think about it, according to Genesis 2, it's human beings who created their own pain, or at least allowed it to happen. And they get punished, for this disobedience. That's what the story tells us. Created order, though, is imperfect. People are imperfect. The church is imperfect because it's people. But if we were to translate this into our understanding of Jesus, the beauty of the story, of course, for me, has always been that God became one of us. And we thank God by killing him. That's the bluntness of the story. But instead of accepting the idea that we might be just as bad as the people who lived in the first century, we then go ahead and pawn it off on God, because it's a lot easier to blame God, I think, than to embrace our own culpability or the possibility of it. I think this day is underappreciated, at least by most of our Protestant brothers and sisters. Good Friday, it's like Ash Wednesday, and the day after Christmas and Easter, they're usually the lowest attended services of the year. Maybe it's too triggering for some, and I get that. It dredges up memories of loved ones who've died. And it forces us to be sad and to relive that. And nobody really wants to do that any more than they have to. But I think we should take another view of it. I think it's in the remembering that we become immortal, in a sense. It's that earthly immortality as opposed to heavenly immortality. And even though our earthly lives are short, they can go on for a long time if we're remembered. And in church, we do a lot of remembering. We remember our baptisms. We do the Last Supper in remembrance of Jesus. Even Jesus talked about people who did kindness for him, the woman who anointed him, that her story would be remembered forever, even though her name wasn't. There are low points in our lives. We've had a lot of low points in the last year. We've had a lot more death in the last year than ever in our history. But those low points also can be meaningful. The idea that you can't experience the mountaintop without the low points, it may be trite, but it's also true. I think too often it is in reaching the bottom that we find our trajectory up. So today we take time to remember the low point. We can't gloss over it. We can't ignore it. We just have to remember it and understand that we'll get better. As they say, Sunday is coming, but don't rush it. Take today and consider and remember. I'd like to invite our last reading to be read for us.
Sending after the light lead. Since then, we have had a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast to our confession, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses. But we have one who in every respect has been tested as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with boldness, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to the one who was able to, because of his reverent submission. While he was the Son of God, he learned obedience through what he suffered, and having been made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him.
Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they nailed him to a tree? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they laid him in the tomb?
Thanks, Harry.